We read in the Bible in Genesis chapter 12, the Lord said to Abraham, "Get out of your country, from your kindred, from your father's house, to a land that I will show you. I will make you a great nation. I will bless you and make your name great, and you shall be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and I will curse him who curses you. And in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed." And in the book of Hebrews, it says, "By faith Abraham obeyed when he was called to go out to the place which he would afterward receive as an inheritance, and he went out not knowing where he was going." By faith, sojourning in the land of promise, as in a foreign country, dwelling in tents with Isaac and Jacob, the heirs with him of the same promise. So Abraham got the call of God. We have to understand the present Israel conflict with the Arab nations is not what Israel desired to do, but Israel also want to keep the promise which God had given to Abraham. From the river Euphrates to the river Nile was the kingdom, the country which was promised to Abraham. And the Jews are the descendants of Abraham. Their patriarchs were Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and the 12 tribes of the 12 sons of Jacob. And they were given land in Israel, and therefore they have this land belongs to them, which they suffered a lot in 200 years, or rather in 2000 and years behind. They suffered a lot. And then they came to this land, which is their possession. And it says that Abraham, when he came out, at that time he passed to the land to the place of Shechem as far as the terebinth tree, and that Canaanites were then in that land. So this was the land of the Canaanites. Then the Lord appeared to Abraham and said, "To your descendants I will give you this land." And there he built an altar, the Lord who had appeared to him. When Abraham got this promise, at that time, Abraham built an altar. Altar building is a sign of shared relationship and two-way communication. Abraham, by faith, obeyed, came out, and built this altar. This is called as the altar of obedience. It's built after he goes out and not before that. When he was called, he went out into the land of the Canaanites, which the Lord showed him. God showed him that he will be in possession of this promised land from the river Euphrates to the river Nile, and this will be their possession. And there he built an altar to the Lord. This is known as the altar of obedience. And it is built after he goes out on the call of God and not before that. It's not an altar of good intentions. It's not an altar of any other matter, but an altar of obedience. Obedience is always better than sacrifice. And then we find that this particular altar he built, and then he went on and he proceeded further. He journeyed on and he moved from there to the mountain east of Bethel, and he pitched his tent with Bethel on the west and Ai on the east. There he built an altar to the Lord and called on the name of the Lord. So Abraham did not stop there. He continued his journey, and that was the altar of pilgrim character. It identifies Abraham's willingness to give up all the securities of life all the attachment to the world and also all his attachment to his family in father's house. And he journeyed on. And this was a pilgrim character. And when they were journeying at that time, his nephew Lot was also with him. Though Lot did not get a call, as Abraham did, yet he wanted to accompany his uncle, and both of them were going on. And when they were in the wilderness, they were journeying. At that time, their herds, their flocks, it multiplied, it grew, and it became in large numbers. And in the whole land before them, they saw that their all their livestock they grew. And at that time there was quarrel between the herdsmen of Abram and herdsmen of Lot. And at that time Abraham told Lot, "It's not good that we should dwell in such a land with quarrels." So Abraham said to Lot, "Let there be no strife between you and me, and between my people and your people." So the whole land before you is now you can choose which way you want to go and which land you want to take. And at that time Lot lifted his eyes and he saw all the plains of Jordan that was well watered. And everywhere before the Lord he saw that at that time that was Sodom and Gomorrah, which was not destroyed, and Lot chose for himself all the plain of Jordan. And Abraham dwelt in the land of Canaan, and Lot dwelt in the cities of the plain, and pitched his tent even as far as Sodom. But the men of Sodom were exceedingly wicked and sinful against the Lord. And the Lord said to Abraham, after Lot had separated from him, "Lift up your eyes now and look from the place where you are, northward, southward, eastward, and westward. For all the land which you see I give to you and to your descendants forever. And I will make your descendants as the dust of the earth, so that if a man could number the dust of the earth, then your descendants also could be numbered." And there it's written that there in Hebron he built an altar to the Lord. And this is known as the altar of separation. Lot separated, Abraham separated from his nephew Lot, and when they separated, there he built an altar after Lot and Abraham parted ways. So the first is the altar of obedience. For every believer, for a child of God, this is very important. When we get the call of God, we have to decide whether we should obey Him and follow where He leads us without any looking back, neither considering your family, friends, home, relations, world. We have to go forward. And there he built an altar which is known as the altar of obedience. And then when he went on, and that time, that particular place where he came, and there it is said that there also he built an altar, and that was a pilgrim character, the altar of pilgrim character. And that was identified by Abram's willingness to give up everything in life and to follow, staying in tents with Isaac and then with his wife Sarai, and then they would build an altar there. And then when the Lot, his nephew, was there, he had to be separated from him also. And that was the altar of separation. In our life, we need to have these altars. First of all, the altar of obedience is very important for every child of God, because without obedience, we cannot please God. And it says that obedience is better than sacrifice. Altar is a place where we offer sacrifices. And obedience is in greater importance because What God desires, He makes. Like He called Abraham and said, "Offer up your only son Isaac on the altar." And so, without questioning, Abraham proceeded and took his child, and he went up Mount Moriah. There he was about to sacrifice his son Isaac. So, altar of obedience is first. In our life, in every one of our life, we have to have the altar of obedience. And secondly, we have to think that in this world, we are the world is not a home, we are just passing through. As there's a song that the world is not my home, we are just passing through. In the same way as pilgrims, they go from one place to other. We know their character, we see them, how they live, and how they dwell in the land where they are moving. And this is what exemplifies and tells us that we are also pilgrims in this world. We should not hold on to it and live as if this is permanent for us. And then thirdly, an altar of separation is important. And that is where people with all carnal desires, with all kind of worldly ambitions, we should be separate from such people, or else we'll fall into the trap of such people and will spoil our journey as well as our faith and our obedience. So, this is so important that we need to be separated. And what is holiness? There's nothing but being separated for the Lord. And therefore, the Lord says, "Come out and be separate, and I will receive you." Many times we confuse what holiness and separations are, but separation means we are separated for the Lord, and we have to live accordingly, separating ourselves from this present world and live for God in obedience and journey in faith as a pilgrim, and finally, we will be able to live for God and glorify Him.